Hello. Today we're looking at John chapter 9 verses 1 to 12, the healing of the man born blind. In the chapters running up to this, there's been a lot of heated debate with the Pharisees about who Jesus is, and it's in that context that this miracle happens. Jesus actually initiates this miracle. It says that as he went along, he saw a man born blind from birth. And this miracle actually gets a whole chapter devoted to it because it creates a massive brouhaha. But before Jesus does this miracle, he takes a little bit of time to talk about himself. He sets up the miracle before he actually does it, which is quite unusual. This isn't somebody coming to him and asking for a healing, whatever. Jesus has initiated this, and before he does anything, he sets it up, and he talks about the fact that he's doing the work of of the one who sent him. So Jesus talks about himself as the sent one. He talks about night is coming when no one can work. I'm not entirely clear on what that might be, but perhaps he was actually there even referring to his crucifixion, his own crucifixion, which is actually coming up very soon. But then he talks about himself being the light of the world. So Jesus actually contextualizes this miracle. He sees the man, he stops, he says these things about himself, and then he performs this miracle. And what he does is he spits on the ground to form some mud out of the dirt, and puts it on his eyes. And that takes me back to the Garden of Eden, where Adam was actually formed from dust. And it's as though Jesus is reminding us, Jesus is speaking of himself as the creator, as the light of the world and the word that was in the beginning. He is creating from dust sight for this man. And then he directs him to the pool of Siloam. And John himself in this chapter tells us that that means sent. Jesus has just told us that he is the sent one. He's sending this man to the pool, which is like a picture of going to Jesus for our cleansing and our healing. And that's where we will find sight and cleansing. In the rabbinic tradition of the first century that obviously Jesus would have known about, there were three messianic miracles, those miracles that would have heralded the arrival of the Messiah. One was the healing of a Jewish leper. One was the healing of someone with a deaf and mute spirit who couldn't speak. And one was the healing of someone born blind. So here, Jesus is actually announcing himself as the Messiah, which is why everyone gets in such a tiz about this miracle. And they're checking out, can this really be the guy that was born blind? Are we sure? Checking his identity. And then when he says, the man who called Jesus, they can't even speak his name, this man. They're really struggling to accept that this has actually happened. When the man says, I went and I washed, and then I could see. Jesus' blood washes us, cleans us, and restores our spiritual sight as well as our physical sight. This is a big deal. And tomorrow we're going to see a bit more about the Pharisees and their investigation of this, which they were obliged to do if a messianic miracle was performed. But what I just want to go back to briefly is the disciples' initial response about this man's blindness, saying, was it because his parents sinned or he sinned? And I see so much of myself in this. They're looking for an explanation. They want to understand. They need a reason or a cause for this happening. They want someone to blame, maybe even someone to judge. They want to understand so that maybe they can stay in control. It reminds me of Job's comforters, who spend all their time trying to figure out what catastrophic thing what this catastrophic thing is that's happened to Job and why it happened, and coming up with all sorts of reasons about why it could have happened. But of course, Jesus's response is to point towards God, to point towards the Father. And I'm reminded of a verse in Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. So it's not that we can't use our minds at all, but it's not using our minds to help us towards self-sufficiency or judgment or staying in control, but using our minds to depend on the Lord, to trust in him, to seek for his thoughts, his opinions, before we form our own. And in these days of social media, we're so quick to form opinions and judgments about things, aren't we? But Jesus always points us to the Father for understanding of what is going on. And as followers of Christ, that is what we are called to do, to follow him in not always seeking explanation and to understand, to be able to judge, to be able to control and have mastery of a situation, but rather to trust in the Lord and to seek his understanding and be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So this miracle is such an encouragement to us to look to Jesus, who is the light of the world, to look to Jesus, who is the sent one, and to find our sight in him. Amen.